Dr. Garby, we can get ready. I mean, we can get started whenever you're ready.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for jumping on another virtual call on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:15. I appreciate everybody's attention today. I'm going to take you for the next 45 minutes. I'm going to give you an introduction to myself, and then we're going to go on a little science journey with some, as best we can, with some hands-on observations, meaning you're going to look at some videos that I've taken here from my home office, and we're going to talk about this animal called a cavefish. And we're going to learn a little bit about cavefish. We're going to learn a little bit about DNA and genetics, and we're going to learn a little bit about how this animal is helping fight disease. And all of this pertains to biomedical science. And if you don't know what biomedical science is, we're going to get into it in just a second. So I have two screens. One, I run my presentation from. The other one, I can see some faces if you turn your camera on. I also have my chat box up. So if you have anything that you want to put in the chat box, either an answer, a question, a comment, as long as it's on topic, I will do my best to answer you today. All right. So Akoni already says that, I don't know if, sorry if that is a he or she, but he or she would like to be a scientist. So this fits great. Well, I hope he, thank you. I hope you're ready to learn today. All right, so let's see, why isn't this playing? Of course, technology has to break down. Whoops, right when we get started, right? All right. I got to screen share again. Give me a second, please. Screen share this. Go over to this and do this. All right. So what is your job today? Yes, you're going to be put to work. Nothing comes for free, not even a good science lesson. So you're going to have fun today. And I want you to participate, please. You're going to have to make observations. We're going to have to share out what we're observing, what we're inferring. So I want you to participate either in the chat box, or if we're able to do it together, we can share out by unmuting ourselves as well. All right, and we'll see how each of those goes. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, okay? And I want you to find a piece of paper, if you're able, and some sort of writing utensil, whether that's a pen, a pencil, a crayon, or eyeliner for mascara, something that you can write with on a piece of paper, okay? So take about 30 seconds. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. You can kind of keep things in your head, but I like science. As we do science, I like students to write this stuff down. And just give me a thumbs up in the chat box or someplace else on the Zoom call to let me know that you're back at your computer. And again, I'll give it another 20, 25 seconds. All right. Sean has a thumbs up. Thank you. Thumbs up. Got the notebook. Good. I got another one. Israel's got a thumbs up. Thank you. All right, I see some thumbs ups coming through, so hopefully everybody else has been able to find something. I don't want to take a ton of time letting people find this stuff, but obviously, as this slide says, I want to use the pen and paper or the writing utensil and paper to make observations, write your notes, write down your questions if you have them along the way. So that's what we're going to be using it for today. And at the end, if there's still time, I would love for you to share out any drawings or notes that you've taken by holding it up to the camera, and we can share out with the rest of the group. So I'm going to start by just giving you a brief introduction to myself. And I like to do this two ways. I like to tell you about who I am professionally, but I also like to tell you about who I am personally. Why do I do that? One reason is because I'm a real person. I'm just not the guy talking to you today. I have a real person, I have a real life, and I like to share that with my students so you can better connect with me. But also, as we think about our journey down the road, our professional journey, there's going to be a very fine balance between your career and your personal life. And it's important to make sure that you're fitting each of those things together. It's important to take your personal life into account when you're thinking about your professional journey. So I like to bring this up and just share out with your students. So who am I? Again, my name is Dr. Dave. My full name is David Garby. I'm a scientist. I did science for over 16 years or so. I don't technically do science anymore, unless I'm doing it from my home office. Now my job is to talk about the science and educate people about the science that I used to do. So I've done some teaching at local colleges and universities to Philadelphia. But now I do community outreach. Okay, I go to schools, or I used to pre-COVID. Now I do this virtually, but I work directly with students and educators and communities to talk about science and why this stuff is so important. All right, that was me professionally. Who am I personally? Well, I am a husband. My family and I live in New Jersey, which is why I have the state of New Jersey listed here. I have 2 daughters. They are located in your bottom right-hand corner of your screen. They are both in middle school. One of them is in 8th grade, one of them in 6th grade. And we have 2 dogs, Andy and Ruby. Andy is the brown Labradoodle and Ruby is the white fluffy ball that you see laying down. Why do I have a picture of gumballs, a jar of gumballs? Well, when thinking about how I define myself, what characteristics do I use? I am a sweet and candy fanatic. I love sweets, I love candy. I go to the store and I buy the new stuff all the time. So I like to include that as, so you know who I am. I like to stay active, which is why I have a picture of a road bike. So I get on my bike 2, 3, 4 times a week, depending on my schedule. And I like to get out and just take a bike ride to clear my head. When I'm not doing anything else, I like to keep my hands busy. So that's why I have a picture of an old window. I like to do woodworking. So that's an old window that I repurposed in my garage into a family command center for somebody in my neighborhood, where now there's a shelf attached to it and there's a whiteboard, a blackboard, and a bulletin board, so the family can organize themselves around this little decorative piece here. So that's kind of who I am, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. I live in New Jersey. I like to stay active and I love candy. All right. If you have any questions about that, feel free to type them in the chat box. I'm happy to share. Once again, for some reason, I am frozen. There we go. Let's see what is going on with this. I don't know why this keeps popping up. Give me a sec, please. Okay. Let's try this one more time. This might be an ongoing battle here. I'm not sure. Okay, so we're going to go through these slides again. And we're going to be talking about a particular type of science today, and we're going to get into that in just a second. I already said what that type of science is. It's biomedical science. But I want you to be aware that there's many different types of science. Right? There's earth science. There are scientists out there that that study rocks and the earth formations and things like that. There's chemistry. What's the chemical makeup of all the things with which we interact with every day, from food to the wood on my desk to the electronics in my computers. There's physics and how the natural world how the physical world works around us. There's marine science. There's astronomy, where you're looking towards the skies. There's even computer science. The type of science that we're going to be talking about today, and the type of science that I've done throughout my career, and this gets to this, what type of science do you enjoy most, is the question I was just asked. It's biomedical science. All right, so this is the type of science that we're going to be talking about today. Noah asked me my favorite type of candy. Well, Noah, right now in my office, I have Jelly Belly jelly beans, and I have Gobstoppers from Willy Wonka. These are the things that I'm eating these days right now. So I told you I'm a candy junkie. I got them. I got right down here. I pull them out whenever I need a snack. Cool. So what I just said, I'm a biomedical scientist, but what is biomedical? This is a time where I would like you to chime in as the audience. And I like to have a student either unmute themselves or type it in the chat box. When seeing this word biomedical, how would you define it? What comes to your mind? Let's talk about this. All right, Akoni said he'll unmute. Go for it.
I would say like organisms and animals and just life, but using that in a scientific way.
That's a great start to a definition, because you nailed on a lot of things. You said organisms, animals, and life, right? So if we break down this word biomedical and break it down into 2 separate parts, bio and medical. Bio, or biology, is the study of life. right? So we're going to be looking at life, and we're going to be trying to understand how life works. Israel said, would Dr. Fauci be considered a biomedical scientist? Absolutely, absolutely. He is probably one of the most well-known biomedical scientists at this point, though he is more of a physician, meaning I think he has his medical degree, his MD. He's the doctor that you might see in a hospital, for example. But yes, he is a premier leading scientist right now, for sure. So Oconee said life, right? Bio. And I think at this point, probably when I say the word medical or medicine, you probably understand what I mean, things that help us feel better. So in this field, in my mind, the general way to think about it is that we want to understand or study life, whether that's the plant life outside, whether that's the human body, whether that's an animal. We want to understand biology. We want to understand how our bodies work in order to come up with treatments like medications, therapies, and devices that will help us feel better when we get sick, or cure us, hopefully one day, if we get a disease. This is what we are working towards. All right. So keep that in mind as we go through this conversation. Bio is life. We want to understand it. Medical or medicine are things that help us feel better, which is ultimately the goal of what we do. So now, how has, with that definition of bio and medical or biomedical in mind, I want to relate this to your lives. And if you can't think of an example from your own personal or individual life, maybe you can think about it from a family member or the standpoint of a friend or family member. But how has biomedical science helped you to feel better? Right? Let's connect this to our lives. I'm going to just lead the conversation here with one quick example. In the past week and a half, there's been 2 large pharmaceutical companies that have come out with their results from the COVID-19 vaccine. And they say that it's 90% effective, and they're rushing to get their vaccine approved through the regulatory channels here in the United States to get approval, so they can bring that vaccine or deliver that vaccine to all of us, so we can get out of this mess that we're in. That is a premier example of how biomedical science is helping us all, or will be helping us all, feel better. Okay. Now, with that in mind, with that example in mind, and the definition that we just said, how else are you feeling better because of the work that biomedical science has done throughout history? Anyone want to take a guess? Take a stab at it? It helped me feel better by realizing that even during tough times, people can make biomedical science to help. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you're feeling better because of that thought about biomedical science helping us all. What else? Antibiotics. Noah said antibiotics. That's a great example, Noah, right? We have a ear infection, strep throat, some bacterial infection, perhaps. We go to the doctors, they write out a prescription. That prescription goes to the pharmacy, the local pharmacy. We go pick it up, and 3-4 days later, we are feeling better and almost 100% feeling okay. So yeah, antibiotics is a great example. Jada just said vaccines, perfect example as well. And not just COVID-19 vaccines, right? We are talking about vaccines that we get as a kid or as a baby, and they are helping combat diseases that used to kill millions of people every year. And yet we don't even think about those diseases anymore as something that's going to affect the population, because we get vaccinated against them. So yeah, antibiotics, vaccines, COVID-19. What about Tylenol or Advil, something that we might take for granted? We have a headache. What do we think about first? Probably is asking mom or dad, or going to the medicine cabinet and aspirin, and getting some sort of Tylenol or aspirin or Advil. It seems like magic. We just pop a pill and our headache goes away, but that's not magic. That's science. If you know of somebody that has cancer, hopefully they are living a longer life these days because of the research that is being done on that disease. And that's just one of many diseases that scientists are trying to fight. So everything is from something as complex and as big as cancer down to something that we probably take for granted, like aspirin or Tylenol. This is how biomedical science impacts us. And we probably don't even think about it, but if you look around, I'm sure you'll see a lot more examples of this. All right, so let's pause that for a second. Let's now that we have an idea of what biomedical science is, and now that we understand hopefully how it connects to our lives, I'd like to jump into our activity for today. And I'm going to be showing you a couple videos now. This is where you need to break out your pad and paper, your pencil and paper. And I want you to watch these videos that I'm going to show you. And I would like you to take observations. Well, what does that mean? Well, you could draw what you're seeing. It doesn't need to be anything fancy like Picasso or an artist. You could draw what you're seeing on paper in black and white using stick figures. You could write out what you're seeing. You can combine those two and make a drawing with labels and draw and write at the same time. But I want you to pay attention to the animals in this video. Okay, these animals are actually sitting here in my office with me. And then just for the sake of being easy, I put them here on my video. All right, so take a look at this video, start making some observations. I'm going to show you the next video in about 30 seconds, and then we'll talk about those observations and kind of what we're looking at today. And this will loop around in just a second, and I'll let it play through one more time. All right, just take a couple more seconds and finish up any observations that you wanted to make. And now we're gonna move on to the next video. All right, so put a line in your paper, section it off somehow, make it distinct, because I want you to also make observations about this video here. All right, now I know the scene is a little bit different. One of these tanks is literally in front of my window, and the other one is pushed against the wall. But hopefully you're focusing on other things in the video as well. And I'll let this one play another one or two times. And this is what scientists do, right? I mean, scientists make observations about what they're investigating. And they write down details so they can remember it a week from now, a year from now, a month from now. You know, this is what is at the heart of being a scientist. All right. So again, I'll let this loop about one more time, and you can finish up making any observations that you have. All right. Now I'm going to show you a zoomed in image of each of those fish that I just showed you in the tank. Make any final observations that you would like specifically about the fish now that you have a potentially a better view of them. So I'm calling this the zoomed in comparison. All right, take another 5 or 10 seconds and finish making any observations that you want. All right. So let's talk about it. What did you observe? Again, feel free to type it in the chat if you don't like to unmute yourself, or if you wanted to unmute yourself. Let's just be considerate of each other and take turns sharing out what we observed. Okay, Cody's willing to talk again. Go for it.
So I noticed in fish 1, there was like this one fish, and that fish was kind of surfaced at the top, like trying to look at something, and I noticed that it caught all the other fish's attention.
Oh, okay. So you think they were socializing with each other perhaps, and what one of them was doing caught the other one's attention, and he was kind of hanging out at the top. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Thank you for those observations. Great. Israel said their environment. Yes, as their environments were slightly different. They're in a very similar sized tank. And again, one of them is in front of a window just because of location, and the other one's not. And they have different rocks and different enrichment toys and things to play with. I just didn't keep them exactly the same, but their environments are indeed different. What else did we notice? Anybody else want to chime in?
Fish 2 seemed more like frantic, like they were like moving way faster than the
Okay.
one.
Awesome. Thank you for chiming in. Fish 2 seemed more frantic. Maybe I'll call that more active than fish number 1. And we're definitely going to talk about that as well. All right. One more final observation. And anybody else want to share out? All right. Go for it, Cody.
I would say when you showed us the closer observation,
Mhm.
this is a pretty simple observation, but from fish 1, the fish looked a little different than fish 2. Well, a lot
How?
different
How?
of colors and
Okay.
their movement. Like fish 1 was very calm, and fish 2 was just very active and all over the place.
Okay, so we're getting back to that activity level, which is a great observation that people are making. And you also mentioned some some differences in their physical characteristics. I think you said they're different colors, which you said, I think you prefaced your answer by saying these are simple observations, but you know, they are great observations. And I wasn't asking for simple versus hard observations. And some of the other ones on, or some, excuse me, some of the other students on this call may have made the same observations. So there are differences in their appearance, and we're going to call that their pigmentation, or the color of their scales were different. One was a darker gray, and one was a pale orange or peach color. Okay, so got to think about that. I don't know if anybody picked up on this, but one of the fish had a missing feature in its face. They were missing their eyes, and let me just show you what that looks like. Right. Which one is missing eyes?
Fish 2.
Fish number 2, that's right. And if you didn't see it, hopefully you can see it now. Fish number 2, they don't even develop their eyes anymore. They have no eyes. They are completely blind. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, okay? So pigmentation was different, missing features, and their overall size, you may have noticed, was different. Fish number 1 was quite a bit bigger than fish number 2. And that becomes important for our conversation as well. All right. Now, keep in mind, I want to point this out to you now, but I want you to keep this in mind throughout the presentation today, is that these fish are actually the same species. And when I say the same species, that means if I put fish number 1 and fish number 2 together, they would be able to produce offspring together. All right. So being of the same species in the biology terminology means they can have babies together. All right. So they look completely different, but they would still be able to mate and create offspring. So they are the same species, believe it or not. All right, I want to give you a quick introduction of where these fish are found. All right, they live close to each other, yet in a very different environment. So fish number 1, they live outside of a cave on the surface of the earth. Outside of the cave, we're going to call these surface fish. All right, so they live in a normal lake or pond just outside of a cave. And the fish number 2, they live actually inside of that cave. So while, again, they're very close to each other at times, they're actually in very, very different and distinct environments. And this becomes important for our conversation as well. And just to let you know, scientists do go all over the world to collect samples and specimens from these caves in which they find. And amazingly enough, there are living species in there, like these fish, that they pull out, and then we can study them. These specific fish that you just looked at are, if you look on the right-hand side here, they are from the east coast of Mexico. But in fact, cavefish can be found all over the world, in Mexico, in Asia, in the United States. And this is on the left, there is just an image of some other cavefish that have been identified and pulled out of the caves all over the world. So not just in one particular location, although when we find a fish in a cave, we oftentimes try to isolate the surface fish just outside of the cave. So we're comparing very similar groups of fish. All right. Now, how did the fish get in these different locations? You might be asking this question. Well, it's hypothesized that for a while, they were all living outside of the cave on the surface. All right. They were all surface fish at one point. And somewhere about 1 million to 2 million years ago, in this case down in Mexico, it's been hypothesized or predicted that a hurricane or large storm came in, washed some of the water, including some of the fish, into the cave. Then that water receded back, and the water that remained still had some fish. And these fish had to now live and survive inside of the cave. And they've been there for about 1 million to 2 million years. Not these fish themselves, they're not 1 million to 2 million years old, but they've been evolving and creating offspring inside of the cave for close to 2 million years. All right, so what was happening 1 to 2 million years ago? Does anybody want to take a guess what was on Earth? Were there dinosaurs at that time? Were there human beings at that time? So somebody said something about competitive exclusion. That's why I paused. Maybe you can expand on that, Israel. All right, and then what has happened over the last 1 to 2 million years now that they find themselves in a cave? What has happened to them, which makes them look slightly different? All right, let's take the first question. What was happening 1 to 2 million years ago? Just to put it into some context for you, our universe, it's been predicted, is about 13 billion with a B, right? 13 billion years old. That's a lot of years old. So we don't want to talk about the entire universe. We want to focus down here when we find Earth arising. So it's been hypothesized and predicted that Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years. Still a little bit too far from where we want to be. So let's focus in on when we start seeing living things that we can identify on Earth. So about 465 million. Now we're in the million range here. 465 billion years ago, plants appeared, with what we know of as trees occurring 80 years later, about 385 million years ago. Now dinosaurs, I asked if dinosaurs were around. Dinosaurs were around between 243 million years ago to about 65 million years ago. All right, so by the time we get to where we want to be, dinosaurs would have been long gone by this point. All right, monkeys it looks like they evolved on Earth about 55 million years ago. Still way too far from where we want to be. I'm getting there, don't worry. 4.4 million years ago, that's when we start seeing human-like monkeys. And in fact, the ancestors to humans, Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, started appearing about in the timeline that we were interested in. This 1 to 2 million years ago range is when we see our ancestors appearing. But in fact, whoops, oh no, I didn't. Humans, I'm just gonna have to go through this. Humans didn't start appearing well under 100,000 years ago, as if you look way in the right-hand side. So humans, we are babies when it comes to the Earth and when it comes to the universe. These fish were around and got washed into a cave about 1.2 million or 1 to 2 million years ago. All right, so what has happened since that time? Well, they've evolved. They've changed because they had different requirements to survive inside of that cave, right? They never came back out. So how are they going to live and make offspring while living in a cave? What has happened is now they've become a different morphotype. All right, again, if we're going to use this term, we have to be thinking about the same species, so they're able to produce offspring again, but they have distinct traits or characteristics. The leopard on the left-hand side is, I think, what most people think about when thinking about a leopard, but there are distinct morphotypes of leopards in nature. And here's an image of one on the right-hand side as well. Again, just different color pigmentation in this case. In fact, humans, if you think about us, we have different morphotypes as well. We can mate with each other. We can produce offspring. We are the same species, but we have different skin colors. Yes, we have different hair colors. We have different blood types. We have different eye colors. Even between male and female, you can consider those two different morphotypes, okay? So polymorphic, poly meaning many, more than one variant in this case. So I just want to point it out that yes, humans are morphotypic as well. So what is the molecule that determines all of these traits that we have? Something that you may have learned about in school already. It's a large biomolecule. Every cell in our body has it. Anybody know what that's called? An atom? Nope, not an atom. The molecule that I'm thinking of has many atoms in it, actually. I mean, probably billions, if not trillions, of atoms in it. Atoms are quite small. I'm looking for something a little bit bigger than atoms. Genes, yes, Noah said genes. Jada said genes. Yes, genes are are part of or are contained within this biomolecule called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, so our DNA is what gives us our traits. It's kind of like the instructions for who we are. So everybody's getting this now, right? I think you probably heard about it. What is DNA? Again, DNA is the blueprint of life. It contains all the information to build something from scratch, something of the natural world from scratch. All right, provides the instructions required for an organism to develop in the world in which it lives, to then survive in that world, and then hopefully the end goal is to reproduce and create offspring. Okay, this is the primary functions of DNA, but every cell has it, and it's the repository or the set of instructions that make us who we are. All right, where is DNA found? Well, hopefully you're thinking about the cell. There's many different types of organelles you may have learned about through your studies in biology or life sciences, many different structures in our cell. And for the purposes of DNA, we know that all the DNA in a eukaryotic cell is found in the nucleus. Right. Just want to give you some fun facts about DNA because I actually love this molecule. This is what I worked on for most of my scientific career. There's about 3 billion chemical letters, right? Otherwise known as these bases contained within the DNA, those A's, T's, C's, and G's. All right, there's about 3 billion chemical letters in every cell of your body. In fact, each cell, when you put all those chemical letters together, we have about 6.5 feet of DNA if you were to stretch it out, but it's really thin. Clearly, it's a microscopic molecule, right? So you could fit about 25,000 strands of DNA next to each other, side by side by side by side, in the single width of a human hair. So there's a lot of it. We can stretch it out if we had to, but it's quite thin. We wouldn't be able to see it. And in fact, if you try typing all 3 billion of those letters out on a typewriter or on a keyboard on a computer, it would take about 29 years to type out all those letters if you were to type at 200 words per minute. And that's without taking any breaks at all. No potty breaks, no food breaks, 29 years. So that's just some fun facts about the DNA. So I asked you this question: what is the biomolecule that determines our traits? Well, it's DNA. DNA is the biomolecule that determines our traits. So why are some of your traits different from other people? Why are my traits different than other people's? If we all have the same DNA, why are we different from leaves? And why are we different from those fish? That's because DNA is like a recipe. And picture a cookbook. And if you were to pull out a recipe, you could make something from scratch, right? In this case, I just found a recipe for apple crisp, which would require apples to make an apple crisp. However, like the recipe, we can make a change to DNA, or nature can make a change to DNA. And perhaps instead of putting apples, now that recipe would put in a pear. I don't think we would have an apple crisp anymore. We would have a pear crisp, perhaps. Okay, so we can make changes to DNA, and nature can make changes to, we can make changes to recipes, if you think about it. And scientists and nature can make changes to DNA. And over time, those changes to the DNA gives rise to these different physical and behavioral characteristics that we all have. This is just a quick example showing you eye color, but this could have pertained to skin color. This could have pertained to the way we behave and the way we sleep at nighttime. Okay, minor changes to the DNA gives rise to these different traits. All right. So what is it called when nature or scientists make a change to DNA? What is that change called? There's a particular name that I want you to think about, or a particular term, should I say, right? If you change DNA, it's called a what? Okay, evolution. I like that answer, Israel. I wasn't thinking about that, but I think that is definitely the end result, or the process. After the DNA changes, things will evolve. Yeah, that's a great response. Wasn't the word I was looking for, but I like it. All right, the word I was looking for is a mutation. All right, and as the DNA changes or the DNA is mutated, things may evolve. So that's how we'll get to there. All right, and in nature, a change that occurs in DNA is oftentimes unpredictable. All right, and once the DNA changes, you might see a different trait or characteristic of that particular animal or organism. And if it's better fit for that environment, then it might get passed on in the offspring. All right. Now I put a red X over the prefix "un" in unpredictable, because this is talking about the natural world. As a scientist, I could make predictable changes to DNA, right? And I did this many times. I would make a predictable change and put it back into an animal. In this case, I was working with fruit flies, and I would change the characteristics of that fruit fly. Okay, so in nature, it's unpredictable, but you have to understand that in the science labs, some of those changes can be predictable, right? Akoni, what did you want to say about that?
So, I used to think a lot about like the whole mutation thing, and I was wondering if you could answer this. Like, if you mix like a cell from a human body and mixed it into like some sort of animal, is it actually possible to have a mutation of those two subjects?
No. There's many different complexities of an animal cell versus a human cell versus a plant cell. Right. I mean, they all have very similar basic biologies. And at the very simplistic level, the DNA is the same, but there's a lot of different complexities that wouldn't allow that to happen. Right. That's why you can't even mate a cat and a dog together, right? Or two things. You can't even produce a dog, or take a cell from a cat and a dog and make a cog, if you will, or a DAT, because biology just doesn't allow that to happen. Now, what we can do is we can take, for example, bits of DNA from, let's say, a human, and we can then put that bit of DNA, maybe it's a gene, maybe it's just part of a gene, but we could take a little bit of DNA and we can stick it in another animal or another organism and ask what happens. And vice versa, we might be able to one day take a little piece of a DNA from some other species, or maybe if we made DNA in a test tube and put that back into humans. But to kind of mix DNAs between species or animals, or even mixed cells, it's darn near impossible.
Okay.
Good question, though. Good question. All right. So changes to DNA called a mutation. Once those mutations get passed down between generation to generation to generation, as Israel said, this might lead to evolution or that species evolving. What are causes of natural mutations to DNA? Well, mutations occur spontaneously in our bodies every day when our cells divide. So you have to remember that you start out as just one cell. That one cell has to divide over and over and over and over again, many times, to produce all the cells that are in our body. And in fact, even as an adolescent and as an adult, some of our cells are still replicating and dividing. And during that process, when a cell needs to make a copy of itself, there are sometimes errors in that process. So that could give rise to a change in the DNA or give rise to a mutation. Other things in our natural environment can cause a mutation as well. Those are called mutagens. Those could be the sunlight, for example. The UV rays that come from the sunlight can actually damage our DNA and our cells, which sometimes might cause skin cancer. But other things in the environment, like chemicals, either natural or man-made, or fine particles, right? They can get into our bodies and they could change our DNA as well. And I think oftentimes when a student or somebody in our community hears the word mutation, I get the impression that a lot of people think that mutations are bad. Mutations cause disease, mutations cause cancer. And in fact, they do, but not all mutations are bad. All right, we need mutations to allow us to become better fit for our environment. So just look at this image right here. Maybe the ancestor bird was the bird on the left. That bird was around for a long time. It just had trouble getting its food. It had to wait for that worm to crawl out of the hole in the tree. And as time went on, and random and unpredictable changes occurred in the DNA of that bird, perhaps it caused its beak length to grow. And over many generations, those changes started to benefit that bird, and they were incorporated into what we now see of the bird on the right-hand side, which is it has a lot longer beak, and it's able to better feed itself and get its food from the tree. So it's better fit perhaps for its environment, which allows it to live longer or live better. So not all mutations are bad. In fact, many of them are quite good. And in fact, many mutations have no consequence at all. So we just want to keep that in our minds. When we hear the word mutation, we don't necessarily want to think of cancer or disease. Mutations are good. So similar animals go through mutation to benefit them. Well, it's not a choice that they make, Israel. As we said, it's an unpredictable change. So, right, if these changes occur all the time, and all of a sudden a bird has a change that gave it a beak that's twice as long, it actually might have a better opportunity to get the food. With time, that bird may now have, it may result in a bird with a longer beak. And then another random change might make the beak grow even longer, and it might make that bird more fit for the environment. Yeah, so like some turtles have long necks and short necks. Think of a giraffe. Maybe the giraffe was living someplace where it needed to get its food high up. And it didn't intentionally make a decision to have a long neck. It didn't tell its DNA to change in order to give it a long neck. Those changes occurred naturally and unpredictably in nature, but the result of that change caused that animal to continually have a longer neck, and it was better able to survive in the environment that it was in. So that's how things evolve, and that's how different characteristics arise from these unpredictable changes in DNA. All right, I hope that was clear. And now let's kind of wrap this up. Let's go back to our fish and learn about how these unpredictable changes in these two different species of fish are helping scientists understand diseases that affect our own body. Coney, go for it. You want to talk again?
I just have one question about the bird image. So if can the same evolution happen to a human if they in some scenario needed to do something, or a thing when they need to survive? Can something change?
For sure. So let's just talk about some of the differences that we might see in the general population, right? I have lighter colored skin. There's obviously different gradations of darker color skin. When looking at my facial features, they might look different than somebody that comes from Asia, for example. All of those changes, when we weren't mixing as much, when we were evolving, 100,000 years ago, all of those features may have made those populations of humans better fit for their environment. Okay, we don't know why. We can make a prediction. Maybe if you live in an environment that has a lot more sun, your pigmentation in your skin became darker to better protect you from the harmful rays of the sun. That would be a prediction that eventually caused our skin color to change. There's a lot of different features that we could talk about, and what are the benefits of those features over the long term. But that is exactly what we're trying to get at here, is why do things change? Well, how do we change? It's due to the mutations in DNA. But why does that happen? It's to make us better fit for the environment in which we live. Okay, so I hope that's clear. That's a great question. Again, if you haven't been watching, you can take another peek at these videos. Just wanted to bring you back to the zoomed out analysis. And I'm doing this because I want to bring up a bit about what a lot of you said already. There are differences in the activity levels of these fish. Clearly fish number one, the surface fish, are a lot more docile. They don't move around as much. Clearly fish number two seem to be more active. But when we just think about the activity levels, we can make additional predictions about maybe some changes that we can't observe with our own eyes, but that might occur in the fish that are more active, right? For example, you might predict that they have different heart functions. Maybe the ones that are more active have a stronger heart because they need to continually pump blood and oxygen around their body so they can stay active. That would be a prediction. Maybe they have a different circulatory system to pump that, to help get that blood around their body. That is another prediction that we necessarily can't observe from my video, but we can make. Maybe their metabolism is different. Maybe they need to eat more, or something about their metabolism allows them to stay active for a longer period of time. Did you ever think about the one that's moving all the time, whether it sleeps at all? It's a question that we can ask. And maybe they have different sensitivities to their environment. Maybe the fish that are so active over here, maybe they feel every vibration in my house. And they're just always on the move because they can feel the vibration in the water and they just get stimulated to move around. And in fact, all of these things are true. All right. Now, there's also differences in their behavior. We're going to call this an instinctive behavior, right? The ones that were fish number one on the surface, they actually hang out at the bottom and they hide around objects because they're a little bit more scared to be out in the open. They actually have different swimming patterns. The ones on the right, fish number two, they actually swim slightly sideways. And if you watch them, they oftentimes go in a counterclockwise motion. And the way they eat is different. Their foraging behavior, all right? And this question here is probably obvious by now, but these changes were likely caused by changes to what? Yes, their DNA. So now I just want to point these out to you and let you watch them again. You already said that there's differences in their activity levels, but there is differences in their ability to hide near objects. The ones on the right don't care about hiding. They're just swimming out in the ocean. I mean, out in the open. There is differences in the way they swim, and there's differences in the way they forage for food. Look at the ones on the right. The fish are often at the bottom, just poking their noses around trying to find food, where the ones on the left, they actually wait until I feed them every morning. And yes, this probably has to do with because they can see me coming to the tank and they know food is about to arrive. All right. So let's think about this. How are scientists using these differences? Well, heart function. If we can learn about why the cavefish are more active, maybe they have stronger hearts. Maybe scientists are trying to relate this to heart disease. Can we look at the way the heart function of the cavefish help them pump faster, pump stronger, and can we use that information to help patients with heart disease? Sleep loss. Yes, the fish that live in the cave, in fact, are so active, they only sleep for about an hour a day. We know that humans need about 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and if we don't get that, it's a disorder called insomnia, which causes a lot of other complications in our bodies, including poor immune function, risk of depression and anxiety, risk of heart disease, risk of diabetes. So can we understand how the fish have evolved, or what changes occurred in order for them to basically survive without the sleep that a human needs? And then finally, sensitivity to the environment. Maybe we as scientists or in the scientific community can use this feature to study pain. If you're more sensitive, you might be more sensitive to pain. And a lot of patients suffer from migraines or chronic pain, meaning long-term pain. So perhaps we can use these fish to study this disorder as well. Finally, I just want to end here. This is going to take me another 3 minutes, and I hope you can bear with me here. But when looking at metabolism, this is what scientists have already uncovered, and they're already starting to use these differences that they're finding in the metabolism between these two morphotypes of fish to study diabetes. Diabetes is, well, there's type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is a genetic disorder and you're born with it. Type 2 is something that you can develop over time. And for example, if you're overweight, if you eat kind of unhealthy foods, you can develop type 2 diabetes. And what it is your blood sugar level remains high. All right, so that's what diabetes means. You have high blood sugar. So let's take, for example, in a normal situation, hopefully all of us, all right, you eat a meal or you eat a snack like a Hershey bar, it's going to go in through your mouth and it's going to be digested in your stomach. And at that point now, all of that extra sugar and all of the extra nutrients that are and macromolecules that is in that Hershey bar, it's going to be kicked around your body. And at this point, then all of a sudden your blood sugar level is going to go up, and your body's going to say, "Hold on a second, I noticed that my sugar levels are going up. I'm going to produce insulin, all right? And this is a protein in your body that goes around and basically soaks up all of the extra sugar and causes it to be stored in your liver for another day when you actually need it. And this is going to bring your blood sugar back down to normal levels. It's this yin and yang. You eat something with a lot of sugar, insulin's made to get rid of that sugar and bring it back down. Now, somebody that has type 2 diabetes, they actually become insulin resistant. What does that mean? That means when insulin is made and it goes around your body, it actually isn't able to get rid of all of the sugar. So in this case now, that person, the blood sugar level can't go back down to normal and it remains high. And this in and of itself, if you have type 2 diabetes, can lead to other complications. Just simply by having higher blood sugar levels than normal, you can get nerve damage, you can get kidney damage, eye damage, heart disease, and damages to your blood vessels, your circulatory system. This is why we don't want type 2 diabetes, all right? But guess what scientists have found? Scientists have found that in fact, these cavefish, the ones that are blind and have been living in a cave for 1 to 2 million years, they are also insulin resistant, meaning their bodies don't get rid of the sugar as well as they should, okay? They actually want high blood sugar levels in this case. These fish have evolved, their DNA has changed to allow for this to happen, right? So in this case, they have constantly high blood sugar levels because they're resistant to the effects of insulin. Now, when thinking about this from an evolutionary standpoint, having this trait is actually beneficial, right? It helps the fish because if you imagine you're living in a cave, food is often unavailable. You don't get a lot of food. So you actually need your blood sugar level to remain high so you stay alive. However, for humans, that's a bad situation. So just to recap, humans have a normal baseline sugars that are kept low, and it's kept low by insulin. And insulin resistance increases baseline sugar, leading to type 2 diabetes. However, what scientists have learned is that in these fish, the normal baseline sugar actually is high, but they show no signs of complications and no signs of diabetes. They live a perfectly healthy life, even with a high blood sugar level. Well, how does this happen? Why does this happen? All right, these are the questions that scientists are now trying to uncover in hopes of learning about insulin resistance and attempting to create better treatment options for patients with type 2 diabetes, just by learning some biology from these fish. So here's how the scientific process kind of plays out. You're making these observations in nature. These scientists are going around the caves, pulling out fish. They start studying them. Hey, they're making observations like, oh, they're a little bit more active. Oh, maybe they actually look at their blood sugar level and they notice that it's high, right? These are observations that they have. They're more active, but they actually get less food in the cave. So maybe they make a prediction that cavefish store sugar and other nutrients at higher levels than the surface fish, okay? So then that's their prediction. Then they got to go do the experiments. Well, they perform some molecular biology experiments, looking at maybe insulin levels, maybe the sensitivity to insulin. Maybe they actually go and look at their DNA and they find a mutation that makes them resistant to insulin, okay? Then they take all of this information that they're learning and they ask, how does insulin resistance in fish relate to type 2 diabetes? And how can we learn from these fish to potentially help treat these patients? Okay, what are those changes and how are they useful? Let's all learn from that. And again, type 2 diabetes is not the only disease that scientists are using these fish to study. Insomnia, heart disease, chronic pain are other examples of this as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Hopefully I didn't go over too much time, and I'll take any remaining questions that you guys have. And I hope this presented a picture. It helped you do a little bit of science today and help paint a picture of how scientists can use these animals, not just the cavefish, but other animals as well, to help us out and help us feel better.
Go ahead, Akoni.
So I was gonna say this lesson, like this whole lesson, kind of expanded my like wonder of like how this life and all this organism stuff works.
Awesome.
yeah.
I'm glad I can help maybe inspire you to learn more about it.
hmm
Thank you for all your participation today. It was great. Anybody else have any questions? I can show you my well, here's a
one.
microscope. Here's a microscope on my desk, and I can actually just show you the fish here. There's the cavefish, and then down the way I have some other aquatic animals here, and then at the far end are the surface fish. And if I turn around here, you can see I built myself a mini science lab in my office, so I can do experiments. And I told you that I worked with fruit flies. Here are my samples of fruit flies. You can see them moving around. These are my fruit flies that I have in my office as well. So go ahead. I heard there was another question.
I got a question. Are there any current mutations that are like going on in humans right now that we like haven't seen before? Is there some disease we've become resistant to or something like that? Is there any sort of mutation that we can connect back to current humans?
Yep. The one that comes to my mind almost immediately, and it's not like something that's going to happen from today until tomorrow. It's going to probably take millions of years if not thousands of years for these changes to kind of take hold in an environment if they're helping us out. And one particular mutation is the mutation that causes sickle cell anemia, which I know is very prevalent in African American populations, and it's actually can be very harmful and lethal in the Western environments, meaning like the United States. But how and why did sickle cell anemia come into play, and how has it been so prevalent in our society? It's thought, and I think it's probably pretty well known at this point, that from the African ancestors who actually lived in Africa, they were being infected with malaria that comes from mosquitoes. And malaria is something that impacts our red blood cells. And in fact, it's now been shown that the sickle cell disorder or sickle cell disease, the mutation that causes it, helps to fight off malaria, believe it or not. So it's kind of like a yin and a yang. It's helping to protect us from malaria, which was probably very devastating to our ancestors. But in fact, now in today's world, it causes other complications because of the shape of the red blood cells. So again, a yin and a yang, but that's kind of one that the sickle cell mutation is still in our population based on what's been thought was happening millions of years ago. Sorry, not millions of years ago, potentially hundreds of thousands of years ago.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Dr. Dave.
You got it.
Does anyone else have any questions? I want to take silence as a no. I don't see anything coming up in the chat.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dave. And please don't ever worry about going over time. That's never an issue. We're flexible. Okay. So that's never a problem at all. I appreciate
Thanks everybody for your attention today.
To answer everyone's questions. Yeah, and I'm proud of you guys. You guys really, y'all did well today. Y'all made me proud. Didn't make me look bad. I appreciate you.
Maybe we'll have a chance to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I think they would like that, and we'll definitely have more students hopefully next time.
Awesome.
As we continue doing some outreach.
Well, stay safe, be well, and have a happy holiday season, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. You too.
You got it. Bye-bye.
See you guys.